my coffee, I have a candle, and I have my books. It's a little gloomy outside today, so I thought it would be nice to make this a little bit cozier, although the table I'm using is very small, so this will be interesting. As long as I don't knock the candle over, I think we're safe. Okay. Welcome to my October reading wrap up. It wasn't a bad reading month, it was just kind of strange, and I think the reason is because I was reading to the month and the Halloween of it all as opposed to according to my mood. If I read according to what I feel like reading, that's a better predictor of having a successful month. A lesson I guess I'm going to continue to learn. All in all, I read 6 books this month. I have 4.5 of them with me. One of them I donated, and then one I read mostly on audio. I guess I listened to it mostly on audio, and then I finished it on my Kindle. And then I have the other 4 books with me. Nothing is a new favorite. There is one standout, and I think the other ones, it's kind of a mixed bag. But let's get into the reads. Starting off on the wrong foot here, I just filmed this whole thing and then realized I actually hadn't pressed the record button. The first one up for October is We Have Always Lived in... Nope, that's not the right book. The first one up for October is We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. This is my first Shirley Jackson book, and it did not disappoint. I was afraid that it was going to disappoint as I started it, but it ended up being my favorite of the month, and I now have requested The Haunting of Hill House from my library. I've watched the Netflix, but I don't think that counts. I want to read the book, and this one got me excited for The Haunting of Hill House. Although I think that there is a contingent of people who believe that We Have Always Lived in the Castle is actually her masterpiece. I haven't read enough of Shirley Jackson's work to have an opinion on that, but let me know if you think that this is her best one. We Have Always Lived in the Castle is a very short Gothic novel about the Blackwood family. We are with sisters Mary Cat and Constance. They are living in their family's mansion with their uncle, and this is following a very mysterious family tragedy that we do learn about throughout the story, but there is a mysterious element that permeates and sort of like lasts the entire story. The story is told entirely through Mary Cat's perspective, and the real conflict in this book is the sisters, in the wake of this tragedy, have created this almost like sanctuary at the house. They almost never leave the property. If they do, they sort of follow all of these rules and rituals and things, and the whole idea is very isolationist, very protective of themselves, and you have to wonder, like, why are they going to all of this effort to do this? And you get the sense as the outside world of the community where they live starts to intrude a little bit that there has been some friction, some tension between the family and the community based on the tragedy that occurred. In this book, we're really dealing with themes of alienation, superstition, small town cruelty, and I think really this claustrophobia of family loyalty. That was maybe my favorite part, and it's just a brilliant study in perception because we are with Mary Cat the whole time and everything is being told through her narration. We have to start to question, what is she telling us? What is she saying versus what is actually happening? How trustworthy is Mary Cat? And how much can we really rely on her narration? The prose here is deceptively simple, but it's still razor sharp. It's balancing this kind of eerie whimsy with, I would call it psychological menace. Mary Cat's narration on the surface is, very whimsical, kind of like childlike, innocent. She's like frolicking in the woods and she's doing all of these things that read like this is a younger person. She's a younger person's sensibilities. But I think if you're paying attention to what she's saying, we have to question this family and their motives and their dynamic and again, what is actually happening here. I don't want to go too much into that because that's part of the fun of the book, and you can take away different things, I think, and it invites that kind of curiosity, so that is a really fun element. I mean, packed into just a few hundred pages. It's not even 200 pages. There's nothing explicit or gory in the book, so it's not horror on that level. This is definitely more about a creeping unease and this like impending doom, and that really arrives in the form of their cousin, whose name is Charles, I believe, when he arrives at the mansion and he wants to move in and he really threatens to disrupt, and he's the one who kind of invites the outside in, and how that affects the sisters in the family is the main conflict and tension of the book. This was definitely my favorite of the month. The narration might feel a little bit odd at first, but again, you have to keep in mind what is the image that is being presented versus what is going on. So at first, when I was going through the book and reading it, I was a little bit confused about what was actually happening. But as I kind of made myself be a little bit more curious about all of these things, I took, I think, a lot away from it as I was nearing the end. And definitely once I finished and I reflected upon the book, I thought it was just masterful. It was so well done and in this really subtle, nuanced way. Really excited to read The Haunting of Hill House, and I would be really excited to read this one again maybe in a year or something, just when I'm ready to revisit this world, and now having had the experience of reading it for the first time, what I would take away from it on a reread. I loved it. Sadly, that's the last one that I can say I felt lived up to my expectations, and this next one, I don't think it's the book's fault, it's really my fault. So I'm putting this as my next sort of like favorite of the month, even though it's not a favorite book of mine, because I am laying a lot of blame on myself for how I consumed the story, my expectations going into it, knowing the kind of reader that I am. It's like I really have nobody else to blame. The next one is Salem's Lot. So I listened to it on audio. I have it here on my Kindle. I finished it on my Kindle because the audio was just not working for me. And I am so sick of hearing myself say it, yet I will not stop listening to audiobooks. I am now listening to The Dutch House. I thought maybe Tom Hanks could help salvage audio for me, so that's my approach right now. But Salem's Lot. So this is Stephen King. I think it's the second book he wrote, and I'm pretty sure I read somewhere that it's the favorite of his. It's very much early classic King. We have pure horror story. It's set in Maine. The main character is a writer. There's a whole cast of characters. It's very much, I think, what a lot of people, when they think of Stephen King, these are the kind of tropes that people think of when considering whether to read a King book. Salem's Lot in particular is his take on a vampire story. It is set in small town Maine where something dark begins to infect its residents. The main character, or one of the main characters, is Ben Mears. He is a former resident. He's returned to his hometown and finds that this evil has quietly taken root. He's come back because he wants to write a book about the Marston house, where when he was younger, he had a very disturbing experience that has haunted him for the rest of his life. There is a whole cast of characters. Certainly, if you are dialed into anything about Stephen King, or I would say vampire literature in general, the name Danny Glick means something to you, and it definitely means something to me. I will say I am not the biggest vampire story whatever person. I had definitely consumed. I'm just not sure how you even avoid it, especially if you were reading or doing anything in the 2010s when vampires was like all anybody was talking about, it felt like. But it's not the scariest thing. I think because vampires, to say something controversial, vampires aren't real. So for me, the things that scare me the most are things that are rooted in things that feel real. And so supernatural stories actually can be scarier for me because it's usually rooted in something that a human has an experience with. Usually it's like grief or depression. The Shining is a great example of this. That's why that book scared me so much. It scared me so much I couldn't sleep. It haunted me. And I read Pet Sematary a couple of years ago too, and it was the same thing. The horror of the novels are grounded in that kind of tangible human experience. And so is Salem's Lot, I will say. King is so good at crafting his stories like this. He's one of the best. So in Salem's Lot, there are themes of the corruption of innocence and small town America. We have community decay, certainly grief, and this weight of returning home when home is a place that feels fraught for you. It is both horror and this small town character study. And I continue to think that that is really where King thrives. It is very readable, it is very cinematic, it's full of atmosphere and all of these side characters that feel very lived in and that really create a very three-dimensional world that you can inhabit. And it sounds like a book that just lends itself to an audiobook. And it was a good audiobook. Again, this is me personally, I'm just having a hard time connecting with audio right now. My mind is wandering and I can't inhabit the world as much as I can when I'm reading it. So in that respect, when I switched over to my Kindle, I felt like it was easier for me to connect to once I started actually physically reading it with my eyeballs. Some of the sections drag a little bit, I'm sure that it could have been edited a little bit, but, I'm not going to fault a book. I think it was written in the 70s. And again, it was one of his first ones, so who am I? I think the ending, though, really lands, which is kind of rare for him. Even though The Shining scared the absolute bejesus out of me, I don't love the ending of The Shining. Oh, by the way, speaking of bejesus, the word jehoobies is used in this book. Jehoobies to mean women's breasts. So that's a new one. Some of the scenes are genuinely creepy in Salem's Lot, even though, again, I'm not too terribly scared by vampires. But the ending, yeah, that creeped me out a lot, I will say. So who knows whether it's because I was reading it or because the ending is genuinely good. I think it's probably both, but I'm going to give King credit where credit is due. The ending was quite well done. So it's not my favorite King because I don't love vampire stories, so I think that would be true regardless of whether I read it, but I still really admired it as an early showcase of his talents and his skill as a horror writer. He's definitely worth reading no matter what you're doing. My favorites are Pet Sematary and The Shining, but if you're going to be a King completist or if you're even just interested in him, I think Salem's Lot is an absolute must. The next one is Love Forms by Claire Adam. I talked about this one recently in my most recent reading vlog. I was making my way through Love Forms. I started out really liking it, and as I was making my way through it, my feelings shifted. But this is another one where, for me, I have a hard time objectively reviewing it, so I'll explain. Love Forms is a mother-daughter story about how love and resentment shape family ties over time. It is a story of Dawn Bishop. When she was 16 years old, she found herself pregnant. She was from a very prominent, wealthy family in Trinidad and Tobago. And at this time, and in this community and culture, having a teen pregnancy was a big no-no. So she was kind of like shipped off to this, it sounds like a convent. I mean, she describes nuns. It's never expressly stated to my recollection, but it was somewhere in Venezuela. And the journey over there, it was this very dangerous boat ride. And the whole thing was traumatic for her, to speak nothing of the fact that she had to, I'm going to say, like, she basically had to get rid of her baby. She was just taken away from her. And when she returned home, her family made everybody promise, it was this family pact, that they would never speak of this again. It was just erased from their collective memories. But obviously it wasn't. So this is where that kind of resentment is coming in. And we're meeting Dawn as she is in her like mid to late 50s. She's at this turning point in her life where her marriage has ended. She has two sons who are grown. They're sort of embarking on their own lives, forming their own independence and their own careers. And she is at this fork in the road, but she's now reflecting on the events that occurred when she was in her teens. And we learn that she has been trying to find the daughter that she gave up. Presumably, the daughter was adopted by a family, but I mean, she really has no idea because it was all just so hush-hush that she is just groping around in the dark trying to find a clue. And it's so painful, it's so emotional to think about. So that's the story. And here's where we run into some issues, in my opinion. The writing, on the one hand, I liked it because I felt it was very conversational. It feels like Dawn is just talking to you. It's told in first person from her point of view. And it does feel like you're just having this like long, gosh, it's almost like a therapy session, or you're just like really good friends with her and you're having coffee that goes for hours and hours because she's telling you this whole story. But at the same time, there is this emotional distance, this emotional coolness that keeps you at a remove. And maybe that is intentional. I didn't get the sense that it was intentional, but I mean, obviously the author would have more to say on that than I do. It just felt so controlled that I had a hard time really connecting to Dawn, even though the actual story is, I mean, it's emotionally devastating. The idea of a mother not being able to be with her daughter and that she can't have any part in her life, and to even express a hope or a desire to is looked down upon, or she's chastised for it by her family. That is so sad to me. And for me, this is where I'm having a hard time, I think, being an objective critic, is I've mentioned, my mom passed, it'll be a year in December. So that's why I was not super, it wasn't the first book that I wanted to read from the Booker long list. This was longlisted for the Booker Prize. I just wasn't sure if I was ready to read it. And it was fine. The ending was so sad to me, and I just didn't make me feel great. And I didn't like it. I didn't like feeling that way, but again, that's maybe more of a me thing and where I am personally in my life. So take that for whatever it's worth. I guess I admired the book more than I loved it, but it is a strong Booker long list contender. I understand why it didn't make the short list. I don't think it is quite as resonant as the ones that are on the short list, but it's still definitely, I think, yeah, a worthy contender, worth a read, but not a book that I think I'll be revisiting anytime soon, or, maybe ever. I'll probably end up donating this one. Okay. The next one is White is for Witching by Helen Oyeyemi. I said I would learn how to pronounce her name, and I failed to do that, so I hope that's correct. I've had this on my shelf for several years, and there were a few people in the book club that I participate in that had read this recently, and it sounded very much up my alley, but yeah, I wasn't super jazzed about it. It's another gothic tale about this strange sentient house in Dover, England, where twin siblings, Miranda and I'm forgetting the other kid's name, are living with their father. Their mother has died, and there is this very like thin boundary between the living and the dead. As I say that, I'm not even sure if that's true. The house has a perspective in this story, so it's told in different points of view, and the house is one of the points of view characters in this story, which took a minute for me to realize, and I think that is some other readers' experience. It's very much a book about alienation and othering. The house is this xenophobic house, so anybody that doesn't align with, I guess, like the house's values is deemed unworthy. We're learning how the house sort of channels its agenda through the inhabitants of it that it deems worthy of fulfilling its goals, which are quite diabolical, quite malicious. So as I say that, it sounds interesting. The main thing that kept this book at a distance for me, well, there's a couple things. The first and foremost, and this is becoming a theme of this wrap up, it's a me thing. I don't always have the easiest time when there's an eating disorder plot going on. And in this book, it's not an eating disorder in the way that I think a lot of people think of it. So Miranda, who's one of the main characters, right? Yes. Miranda has a rare eating disorder called pica. If you've ever watched very bad reality television, you might know what pica is. It's basically eating things that aren't food. In this case, she really likes to eat chalk. And the book is quite graphic about how that's affecting her health and how she's losing a lot of weight and just like fading away, and she's really weak. Even as I describe it, I don't want to talk about this anymore. It's too upsetting to me. So I hated that. It was really eerie, and I think that if the author heard me say that, she might say, "Great, that was the goal of it." But for me, it was unsettling in a really unpleasant way, and it didn't creep me out. It just disturbed me, and yeah, not in a good way. The other thing is that the writing, it's very lyrical, and certainly I think Oyeyemi is talented. But sometimes an overly lyrical book isn't my favorite. There are some writers who can get away with it. Jesmyn Ward comes to mind. She writes in this kind of flowery, lyrical prose, but it works there. And I can't, I'm not smart enough to explain to you why that works for me and this didn't work as much. I think because this one just felt a little bit too abstract and like it was trying a little bit too hard in that respect. But that's just my opinion, of course. So yeah, I guess I'm not 100% sure how I feel about it at the end of the day. Despite everything I've said, I am intrigued because I know that there is a story here that I find really interesting, and I did actually enjoy the writing. I'd be curious. I would take another stab at Oyeyemi. I think that she just wrote a new book or she's about to write a new book. I feel like I read or heard that somewhere. But either way, I'm not turned off by the writer. I just hated the eating disorder thing. So yeah, I don't know if anybody else would feel the same way about that. A lot of people really like this book, and I think that the imagination and the style make me curious about her other work and might work for you in this book if you are not turned off by what I've said. Next, we have Lily Willowes by Sylvia Townsend Warner. This was the one that I read for Jessie's book club, Sunbeam's Jess, and it was very okay. Lolly Willowes is about Laura. Lolly is her nickname, Willowes, who is a spinster living in early 20th century England. The story takes place right around World War I, with most of the events happening after World War I has ended. She has lived with her father, and then after her father dies, she moves in with her brother and his family. But she then decides kind of abruptly that she is going to forge her own path. She's going to move to this place called Great Mop, and she's going to live on her own. She's not going to be at the behest of her family, who are always needing something from her, always expecting things from her, but not really appreciating or respecting her. This is a story about feminism, autonomy, spiritual awakening, and I think also if you take it in the context and if you consider the background of the author, a resistance to patriarchal control. There's also questionably some queer bent to this book. I don't know that that's ever been determined exactly, but Sylvia Townsend Warner, I believe she lived with a partner for some years, and so I wouldn't be surprised to learn that that was maybe a less obvious element of this book. There's nothing overtly queer going on in the book. There's a sense, there's a vibe. Once Lolly leaves her family home, I guess, in England to go live in Great Mop, where it's kind of a funny little cast of characters that live in Great Mop, and you learn more about the community residents and what's going on there. It takes a bit of a turn and becomes this different book altogether. When I was reading it, and this was the sentiment expressed by a lot of other people in the book club, that the change that occurs like midway or maybe part 3 of the book feels very abrupt. It's like a totally different genre of book than you feel like you're reading when you start the book. When you start it, it feels like, oh, you're just in England. It's very classical. It's what you expect, and then it becomes something different. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just didn't quite work for me in this story. That said, it is gorgeously written. It's so elegant. I underlined so much in this book, not because of anything, honestly, other than I just loved the writing. I think that Warner is a stylist through and through. This may be her first book. I don't know that for sure. But if it is, it does kind of read like a debut novel. There's good ideas in here. It's just not quite, the connective tissue isn't quite there. It's brilliant in parts, but uneven as a whole. Lastly, we have The Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny. I donated this book, so I don't have the physical copy with me anymore. I talked about it in a couple of videos already, so I'll just briefly cover the broad strokes. The Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny is an ambitious, sprawling novel by Kiran Desai. This is her return to writing. I think it's the first book that she's published, at least. So I don't know if it's her return to writing, but it's her return to a published book in the 20 some odd years since she won the Booker Prize for The Inheritance of Loss. This story is weaving together several storylines, but our main titular characters, Sony and Sonia, I do it all the time. Sonia and Sunny are the focus and who we are with the most and who we're seeing this world with the most. The idea of the book is that Sonia and Sunny meet kind of by chance, and it feels very awkward when they meet because they almost instantly are connected to each other and they end up falling in love. But there's a past that is a little bit more complicated because their families, they both come from quite prominent families in India, had tried to orchestrate an arranged marriage. So there's this like discomfort and they're kind of, I don't know, tiptoeing around each other and it's a little bit clumsy, but there is an endearing quality to it. It's just the problem with the book, and there's multiple in my opinion, the length is, it does not justify itself. It overstays its welcome in my opinion, and it's too much of a mess of ideas. So what I've discussed with Sonia and Sunny, that feels like a very small part of the book, although it is marketed as being what the book is about. And that's not what it felt like to me. It felt like that occupied a very relatively small experience with the book, and then everything else was just all over the place. We're talking globalization, migration, fractured identities, family generational conflict. It's trying to do too much so it can never do anything or any one thing particularly well. That sounds harsh, and I think if it had been a little bit shorter, I might not feel quite as strongly about it. And I don't mind a big book. I like a big book. I like spending time with a book as long as I'm enjoying the experience. And this one just felt like it was trying to get to a point and just never really got there. It was very lush, very intricate. It just was very self-consciously literary and trying to do, too much. It just ends up feeling way overstuffed. I felt like the pacing was uneven. The tone was sometimes veering into pretentiousness as well. And I mentioned this in, I think, my Booker ranking video. It was just so, like, almost awkwardly aware of itself. And I can maybe understand if you're Kiran Desai and you're like, oh, this is my book that's being published after I won and I've, it's been 20 years or whatever. I can understand why that would be the case, but I didn't like it. I didn't like it. It just felt like it knew it was going to be judged for a prize and it can't quite like breathe because of that awareness. There were glimmers of beauty, especially in some of the connection between a couple of the characters towards the end, between Sunny's mother and Sonia. I loved those chapters. I wish that they had taken up more space in the book, but they didn't. So it wasn't really enough to redeem the previous 600 pages or whatever of wondering where the story was going and never feeling like we quite got anywhere. But if you felt differently about it, please do tell me. I don't love the idea that I spent 2 weeks with a book and I feel that way about it. Although maybe it doesn't matter. Art is supposed to evoke an emotion, and certainly that one did end up evoking an emotion. It was a frustration, but an emotion nonetheless. Okay, that was everything that I read in October. I think looking back, this month, October, reminded me of why mood reading matters so much, at least for me. I want to read something because I want to read it, not because I feel like I should, or I'm trying to be trendy or cutesy with something. I just need to go with my gut. And thankfully right now, what I'm reading, I think, is accomplishing that goal. I'm reading Gormenghast, the Gormenghast trilogy. So we're starting with Titus Grown. This is part of a slow read with Jessie Leatherby's book club. Then we are also reading Wuthering Heights for November's book club, and I am enjoying that so far. Then the book that I want to read that's not tied to book club or any kind of commitments like that is Either Or by Elif Bachman. I read The Idiot earlier this year and I loved it so much, so I got Either Or for my birthday, and I'm ready to revisit Salem and her quirky little existence. Then I am listening to The Dutch House on audio, and I have had that book on my shelf for a really long time actually, but I have heard over the years that the audio is really great because Tom Hanks narrates it, and I don't want to dismiss audiobooks, so I'm just hoping that this kind of like rejuvenates that experience for me. And on that note, for the rest of the year, I'm giving myself permission to just read by instinct, and aside from book club, that's what I will be doing. So hopefully we will end on a high note, and I think November's wrap up will look a lot brighter than October's. Thanks for spending time with me. As always, I really appreciate anybody who's watching and enjoying the experience, of course. And if you are enjoying the experience, please do like the video and subscribe if you want to see more from me. I've been doing kind of a mix lately where I have the sit down videos. I will always continue to do the sit down videos, especially for the wrap ups. I have a couple other more like sit down videos in mind that I've been brainstorming, I guess. And then I've been doing reading vlog style videos. So I have one about reading habits up, and then I also have one that I just did for the last month of October where I was finishing Love Forms and Salem's Lot and then starting my November reads. So please check those out if you are into very slow living type of content. It's all ambient and very fall, hopefully. We're like so in fall right now. I love it. Anyway, okay. I hope everybody's having a good day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.